Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of the Rangers Gameplan podcast, where we discuss the past month that was the Rangers. It's been a
Yeah, I
hot
think it's
minute.
been a month. Yeah, it definitely has been a minute.
A mixture of the Rangers doing virtually nothing and then everything all at once. You came down with a unfortunate little flu cold thing. We're out of
Yeah, that
commission
was
for a
so bad.
while. Yeah, that
That was terrible.
Yeah, I would imagine. But we are back with two massive pieces of information. The biggest piece, I would say, is Artemi Panarin's haircut.
Yeah, that is very groundbreaking. It's I didn't believe it was real until today, and then like second and third and fourth pictures started coming out. And I'm like, oh, he actually did that. Um, I it's a little weird. Like we shouldn't care. We shouldn't care at all. But I care a lot. I really do. I feel like with most other players, I really wouldn't. But I
That
think Panarin, Mika, and Igor are the only
yeah,
players where it's like they just can't be bald, and now
looks
Panarin is bald.
so
So
it looks so weird, man. Like that would have been like Henrik Lundqvist middle of the just randomly showing up to training camp completely buzzcut. It's just it goes against the natural law and order of the world, and I don't love it. So we
yeah,
we have two massive things to talk about with head today. That that's a typo right there, but we're gonna keep going. The Rangers officially have a head coach. It's it's done. All of the question marks are they've done it. They've went out, they've made their selection, and it is the most, and I don't mean this necessarily in a bad way. It's the most plain vanilla ice cream selection you could have made with the coaching options available, and I'm kind of happy with it overall.
yeah. It's the one that I'm the least upset about.
Yeah,
Out of everything that could have possibly happened, I will 100% take this hire over really anybody else that was available.
I when Patrick Waugh's name started to get floated around, I was like, oh god, here we go. That
And
was
need we mention John Hines? Like I would have truly lost my mind if that ended up happening.
I
I
would love to
I
talk.
really I would have given up all hope if that actually happened.
Fascinating fact about John Hines is he took over for Laviolette when he got fired from Nashville. Same year.
Yeah, I
Like
actually it definitely is pretty interesting. I don't it I mean, to be honest, that's I don't know what they were thinking. Like that's one of the bigger downgrades I've ever seen, to be honest.
like and what I think is insane about the Laviolette firing from Nashville, which I'll just touch on for a second. They won the Western Conference, then they finished first, and then they fired him because he started 19, 15, and 7.
Yeah.
I
That's
that's
unreal.
wild to me. That's how that went. I've said this, I don't know if I've said it here just to other people and through what have you. I know I haven't said it here because we haven't recorded in a decade. I I, I like Laviolette the most. I would have preferred to have gone off the board with Knobloch, but I just kind of knew from inception that probably was not going to happen because I
Yeah,
felt that was a
I
little
think the last time we actually fully broke down all the candidates, we were both fully on board with Knobloch. But the more I thought about it, I mean, this is going to be Chris Drury's last hire as Rangers
yeah.
GM, one way or the other, right? So there was just no shot he was going with somebody that's unproven. It sucks if Chris Drury were just brought in here, last year, then maybe I could see it. But this is, his job is riding, in the same boat as Laviolette's. So
Yeah.
it's there was no way he was going off the board with anybody. Now I was going to, potentially think about bringing in Knobloch as the assistant coach, but
Mhm.
Hartford announced they are bringing him back as the head coach there, so seems like that's off the board.
Shame. I I'm big on Knobloch. I would like to see him here eventually. In a perfect world, Laviolette stays here for 5-6 years, wins every single Stanley Cup, and then rides off into the sunset happily. And then Knobloch comes up. That being said, I would like to keep him in the organization. And if it's head coach for Hartford, I'm happy with that. Because if something were to happen with Laviolette or with whatever coach ends up here in the future, I would very much like to have Knobloch as that emergency backup plan if you absolutely need it.
Yeah. I think, it's, to be honest, half the reason we were really, in on Knobloch was because of the unknown, and just a matter of, we didn't necessarily, love any of the other candidates. So who knows truly how good he actually is. Now, I don't really know what they're going to do with the assistants, because I thought Knobloch would have been the perfect candidate for head coach. And then obviously when that was off the board, I thought he would be even more perfect for assistant coach. So I don't know what's going to happen there. The one thing that I will say that is obviously very odd, the Rangers waited a very long time to make this official.
Yeah.
Now, that means one of two things. I mean, obviously, if you want to look at it optimistically, you could just say Chris Drury is, he was doing his due diligence and talking to every possible candidate, or at least, exploring all avenues.
Right.
But, I mean, they interviewed Laviolette, I believe, 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, something like that. And then I think they brought him in for a second interview. And that might have been, I think it might have been 5-6 days ago that happened at this point. So I just think it's a little odd. Obviously, if you want to look at it pessimistically, you could say, well, maybe they were never really that blown away by Laviolette, but they just were even less impressed by everyone else. So they just decided to go with him. Now, the one thing that I want to make clear before we kind of fully give our opinions on him,
right?
I do not think Laviolette is a terrible coach. I don't think anybody truly believes that. I think if you do think that, you're probably just being a Debbie Downer, just because you might have a sour taste in your mouth from everything that's transpired with this team over the past couple months. I get it, but he's first all time in wins as an American coach. I think he's 8th all time in wins ever as a coach. So he's got to be doing something right. I think I'm more intrigued by who they bring in as the assistants more than Laviolette himself, to be honest, because like you said right off the bat, it's a very vanilla hire. There's really not a whole lot that we could say that isn't already, a well-known fact about him. I think I would be shocked if they don't bring in, some off-the-board guys as assistants at least, because I understand Chris Drury. Let's say, if he were to bring in Laviolette, or I should put it this way, let's say he did bring in a guy like Knobloch or Jay Leach or something like that, and they lose in, the first or second round, Drury is immediately gone, right? So, I think bringing in someone like that as the assistant would give him a little more wiggle room, just because obviously the Rangers have an owner that, in the past few years doesn't seem to have the longest leash with a lot of guys. So I think that, knowing that, Chris Drury knowing that kind of immediately pushed him, towards the veteran coach route.
Right.
We're gonna keep saying it. It's a very, very vanilla, basic, almost boring, coaching hire. But like I was just saying, I don't think he's that bad of a coach. The one thing that I do like is he is known to be a bit of a hard ass. Now, I'm not, obviously there's the clip on Twitter circulating around from, I believe, 2011. Of when he was with the Flyers and he was ripping them apart in the locker room. I understand that was a very, very long time ago. So, I'm not necessarily sold on him being this amazing coach just from a clip that's from, quite some time ago. But over time, he has built up that reputation. And obviously, this, every single episode of this podcast, we've been asking this team to give 100% effort. And I'd like to say I'm pretty confident that that shouldn't be an issue with Laviolette, just because he seems to be way more involved with the players and holding players accountable than Gerard Gallant was. Um, we never saw basically any fire or passion from Gallant towards the players. Obviously, we don't fully know what happened behind the scenes,
Right.
but from based on what the players say and based on what players who have previously played for Gallant say, he really does not say much. I mean, he will walk in the locker room and say, basically say, talk amongst yourselves. I'll see you guys out there for the next period. Like he does nothing, right?
Incredible.
The obviously I have been known to strongly dislike Gerard Gallant from day one. I understand my I understand my opinion is very, very skewed one way on this whole situation, but I can confidently say that this is an upgrade. Obviously, I am very, very biased when it comes to that, but for the 2 years Gallant was here, the reason the Rangers were good was because they had Igor Shesterkin, and they had a power play that existed before Gallant was here. So he essentially added nothing to this team. I think the last time that I actually had the stats in front of me and I looked at it, the Rangers under Gallant were 23rd in the league at 5-on-5.
Oh.
23rd. And now I'm not trying to sit here and say that Peter Laviolette is going to make them first or anything like that, but I can at least say he has a system and he will hold the players accountable.
Yeah.
How well he's going to do that is to be determined, but I can at least confidently say that he's going to have some sort of an impact on the team, where I can't pinpoint a single thing that Gerard Gallant changed about this team positively. I cannot think of one thing.
I despised Gallant, and honestly, like, my opinion of Gallant, I tried to go into that as open-mindedly as I could. The game that he screamed at Zibanejad after, and I know I've said this before, after the OT, or basically OT winner against Buffalo, like, publicly, after a game they won, I'm like, look, if you want to get mad at the players, that's fine. Do it behind the closed doors. The thing about him yelling when he was on Philadelphia for Laviolette, it was behind closed doors. That was when he tore into them. That's, for me, a massive difference, and I'm pretty open for the Laviolette hire. I will say, to comment on your thing of they interviewed him like 2 weeks ago, and then they interviewed him a couple days ago, and then today they make the hire. I read that as, I think they wanted to see who got fired. I think Drury was thinking, I just want to hold out and see if Sheldon Keefe or Rod Brind'Amour get fired, and if either of them do, I'm going to take them immediately. But obviously kept thinking about Peter Laviolette, and I think the interview a couple days ago was just to make sure Laviolette was like, hey, we're still very much interested, we're just trying to see what else happens. So I would be shocked. If I had to guess, I would say neither Keefe or Brind'Amour get fired, and they come back and run it back another year with both Toronto and Carolina. That's just the gut feeling that I have. I'll say this as well, because you mentioned his all-time win list for Laviolette. This isn't like he's an 80-year-old coach and he's been coaching for 40 years. He's coached, I want to say, like 21 years? So he's built that up.
Something like that, yeah.
Like, he's built up an impressive win list in short order. Like, this isn't... He's not a Daryl Sutter type who's been coaching since, like, 1957. And he just accumulated all those wins by existing and getting them for free. I'd also throw in, since he started coaching in 01-02, he has not been out of a job for a season. Like, you've seen coaches like Tortorella, Babcock, they won a Stanley Cup in the clutch and grab era of, like, the early 2000s. And then they'd, get hired for a couple years, be fired for a year or two, come back for a few more. He's never been out of a job. Every single year, people have come back to him and been like, yes, we want you to be here, please do that. Which I do think is encouraging for him. The first year he was with the Islanders in 01-02, so taking it way back. He pushed Toronto, who at that time was a historical winner at wild time frame. to
Yeah.
7 in his first season with a pretty mid Islanders team. He won a cup a couple years later with Carolina. First year he was in Philly. That was the the 7th seeded Philadelphia Flyers who made it to the Stanley Cup final, and obviously tried to push the Blackhawks. I think they lost in 6.
Yeah, that was the Patrick Kane overtime winner in 6, where like nobody knew where the puck was.
Yeah,
Yeah, that could have gone to 7.
Yeah,
That
very
could
easily,
have if
very easily.
yeah.
And then a couple years ago, and the thing is, the second team that I love, it's not the Rangers. A team that I do always try to pay attention to. I friggin' love Nashville, and he was there for quite a while. I already mentioned it. He went to the the Stanley Cup final with them against what was about to be a legendary Pittsburgh Penguins team. Pushed them. I believe, did that series go 7? Nashville and
I think it went 5 or 6. I know it didn't go 7, but I know watching that the Predator. Oh my God! Just to speak of that for a second, that was one of the hardest working teams I've ever seen. That Predators team, I wanted them to win that so badly because that team was so fun to watch, and they had pretty much no talent on that team when you really look at it. That was a really fun team to watch.
And that was the thing. He took them to the Stanley Cup final against the Penguins, working hard with nothing more than a goaltender in one of my all-time favorites in good old Pekka Rinne. And so you give him a similar setup here, and you have players who, when you actually get through to them, they will work. Like, you have players that are willing to get down and dirty in Ryan Lindgren, in Jacob Trouba, Adam Fox to kind of an extent, Brennan Schneider, underrated worker on the defensive side of it. He can get it out of them. He got it out of players in Nashville, and I think he can do that again here. I would also say a couple of years ago with a pretty mediocre Washington Capitals team, he pushed Florida to 6 games, which might not sound too impressive, but that was a Florida Panthers team that was supposed to be incredibly threatening. It was their President Trophy winning. Was that last year? That was just last year. Sheesh.
That was just last year. Yeah.
But pushed them 7, and it was not a convincing 7-game series win for Florida. Like, that showed a lot of cracks in them that would obviously get blown wide open against Tampa. But that was a Capitals team that was just so and they did pretty damn well against that, like, 120-point Panthers team. So I do have a lot of optimism for the hire in Laviolette. I don't think he's this incredible mastermind that's going to they're going to win a Stanley Cup every time he's here. But, God, going from Gallant to Laviolette, I think, is a very good upgrade. And, again, it's a vanilla hire, but I don't think you were going to get that home run swing from Drury on it unless a guy like Brind'Amour or Keefe came available. Like, he wasn't going to go off the board too much because he understands, hey, if I want to not get fired, I need to kind of stay relatively safe here. Which
and the one thing that I will just add is, you know, when we're going over his resume and whatnot, he is, you know, he's much more experienced than Gallant is. Obviously he's had a million playoff runs. You know, not to make it seem like he's won 7 cups or anything like that, but he is a very tried and tested head coach in this league.
Right.
The one other thing that I was going to mention is that Predators team that went to the Cup final. I believe it was Colton Sissons that was matched up against Sidney Crosby in the line matchups throughout the entire series.
Jesus.
So to even win a game in that situation is really impressive. I understand that wasn't last year or anything like that. I know it was a few years ago, but you know, like you mentioned before, he's built up this pretty, you know, impressive resume in, you know, 20 years like you said, it's not like it's Daryl Sutter where he's kind of just, you know, climbed up the wins rankings, kind of just, just based on the fact that he's been coaching since World War II. That's not the case. Like I said, earlier, this is the one guy out of everyone available that I was not going to be up in arms about.
Mm-hmm.
He's definitely a much better coach than a lot of people are giving him credit for. I'm seeing obviously a lot of backlash from Rangers fans on it. I get it. It's not like you're getting an elite head coach here, but I don't think anybody really thinks that the head coach is the number one issue. Obviously, Gallant had to go. The players clearly needed a different voice, but speaking of that, the reason the Rangers lost round one is, almost entirely on the players. So
Yeah.
obviously there's some coaching decisions and whatnot that we can critique, but all of these top paid players did nothing. So at least when you get a coach in here that will, tear into them when they're getting dominated for, 4 or 5 games in a playoff series, I think that will help tremendously. The other thing that I will say is, like you mentioned before, he's definitely really good, specifically at getting the most out of defensemen. And being that we have, what we would like to consider, one of the top half of D-cores in the league, I'm pretty excited about it. It's, like you touched on, that there's a lot of guys, on defense that are very physical and not afraid to, get in front of shots and whatnot. So that's kind of Laviolette's bread and butter when if he had to hand pick defensemen, that those are the traits he's going to look for. So, obviously we're not trying to sit here and make it seem like he's going to, be a mastermind and they're going to go undefeated 82-0 and then 16-0. I'm not trying to sit here and make it seem like that's going to happen, but I think this is a significant upgrade over what we had in Gallant and David Quinn the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens. Obviously, nothing's really going to matter until, we roll all the way around until the next playoffs. There's still going to be a lot of question marks. It kind of sucks that we have to go through this. Obviously, now that we've had, some time to sit and dwell on everything and kind of speak logically instead of just with anger, the one thing that I think I can say from my mindset is, obviously I'm not sitting here, in boiling rage every day over the, playoff loss. I think I'm just scared because through, when the regular season rolls around, let's say Mika gets on a hot streak, in the back of my head, I can't truly be that happy about it because all I care about at this point is what happens in the playoffs. So we talked a lot about, during the regular season this year, waiting all the way until the playoffs, and that's when it truly matters. Hopefully, that's going to be the case this upcoming season. I just hope they actually try through the regular season, and we don't just have to sit here and talk ourselves into everything being fine once the playoffs roll around. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, I don't think he's a bad coach. I do think he adds a lot to this team. It's going to come down to the players. It's going to come down to the players, and hopefully they don't waste another year of Igor. We'll see what happens.
God.
Hopefully not.
Please,
I don't know. We will have a lot of fun. Rooting for them to help the goalie out again.
Like
for the millionth time in our life.
Every year, it's just, and you said it just the other day in the group chat. Of just every year you've spent watching hockey is just begging for the team in front of one of the most elite goalies in the league, and you can say that for either one of them. Just begging them, be mid, be mid. Mediocre.
Yeah, it's every playoff run I've ever experienced in my life. I'm like, okay, we have the best goalie in the world. Help him, and you'll win it. And they have yet to do that.
Not all the way.
And the one thing that I will say, the most success that Laviolette has ever had is when he's gotten otherworldly, play from his goaltender, whether that be in Carolina or Nashville or anything like that. So I have some good news for him. Hopefully he actually wins it. You know, I
Yep.
know he went to the final and came up short, but
Yep.
please, it seems like that's the missing piece for him. The one thing that I also will say, the you know, in his time with Washington, this year specifically, they were bad, man. Like that roster was not good. They had no goalie. They
If only they.
they got nothing from anybody in their lineup. Like that, it was a mess there. They're in the middle of a rebuild. Well, not in the middle, but I guess you could say it's starting right now.
Yeah.
So you know, when I'm listening to some of the backlash on him, I just don't know what people expected him to do differently to actually change the outcome in Washington. Like I just can't think of something he could have possibly done there. I mean, you have a bunch of old regressing players. You don't really, you know, I know they had some injury problems and everything, but they got nothing. He got nothing from that roster. It wasn't his fault. Like, what else are you supposed to do other than put your best players out there? And they're just not good enough anymore. Like that, the core group they have there is just they're, you know, at the end of their prime, or the prime is pretty much over. Like there's just not much he could have done there. So I'm excited to see what he could do with a team that's, you know, we pretty much have everyone here in their prime. So you know, we'll see what he could get out of them.
I mean, to go on Washington for a brief second, and then I want to kind of dial it back to the Predators that made it to the Cup final, because I found a couple of fascinating little tidbits on that team. They let Samsonov and Vanacek walk the same offseason. Or I believe did they trade Vanacek and let Samsonov walk?
I think that's the case. Regardless, I don't know what went into either decision.
Rid of
but
two all-star caliber goaltenders the same season. They made it very clear from before the first puck dropped, we are not going for it. We are We are happy to rebuild and let Ovechkin get every single pass over to his one little spot to let him hammer home a one-timer and hope that he can eventually break the record for goals. That is the only thing that entire organization cared about this season, and you could tell immediately. Did Tom Wilson touch the ice for them this season?
I believe so. Like, I don't really know. I think, but I'm not entirely sure.
Like they were.
And the one other thing I will say, just before you make your point, the Rangers got eaten alive by that Capitals team this past year. Did we win a game against them?
I don't want to look it up, but I will.
I know we lost at least 2, because I know we got shut out at home, and then we got embarrassed on national TV on a Saturday by them. So I know there's at least 2, but I don't remember beating them.
I'm going as quick because I gotta know now. I feel we at least took 1.
Okay, but you only won 1 game against
I know
that
for a fact
Capitals
we
team?
got 1.
So I mean,
2-2. They went 2-2. That being
it just
said,
doesn't feel like that.
The 2 losses.
It doesn't feel like that.
The 2 losses were awful. It was a 4-0 shutout and a 6-3 beating.
Yeah, that was that, because those 2 made it feel like we didn't win 2 against them. So, but the reason I'm bringing that up is just because if he's, you know, destroyed the Rangers like that, you know, twice in a season, hopefully he can at least see what the Rangers lack. Even obviously those 2 games are not indicative of what the Rangers are as a team. I get that. But in those 2 games, all of the Rangers' issues were highlighted. So hopefully he looks back on those and he's like, hey, like, why don't you guys try 5-on-5? And then he fixes that. I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking optimistically, but I mean, when you beat a team down like that, as a coach, you gotta know what they're doing wrong.
No, you see, sitting here, I just figured it out. That 4-0 loss, they scratched Hayek and Blay. That was it. That was the problem. Rangers had.
that was the problem.
If they would have had the kayak in, they would have won that game. So the thing that I wanted to go on with Nashville made the Cup final. That team, looking at it, holy God.
Like I said, Colton Sissons was playing like 23 minutes a night against Sidney Crosby.
Okay, so the top 3 scoring centers was Ryan Johansson, fine, solid player. Mike Fisher and Kalle Yarncroke.
Yeah, that is just insane. That's unbelievable.
The top
I mean,
3 scorers were Victor Arvidsson, Ryan Johansson, Philip Forsberg, which isn't bad, but they had 61, 61, and 58 points, which, for the top 3 scorers on a Stanley Cup final team, they had 2 players with 30 goals. And that was it.
Yeah.
They somehow nursed a plus 17 out of Ryan Ellis on the defensive core that year.
Yeah, like I said, a little bit of a grain of salt just because it was a few years ago, but it's still recent enough to the point where you can actually look at it and take positives from it.
Like, the thing is, I'm saying like those players, but they're still in the league. Like, those are still players playing currently.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason I went, oh my God, when you brought up that Predators team was because I was so invested in the Predators that year because they were so fun to watch. And I'm just thinking, like, the guy who coached that team had nothing. He literally had nothing. Like, obviously, he had a couple solid players, but keep in mind, like, solid players. Like, he didn't have any true star talent on that team. Like, nobody. I will mention it for the 3rd or 4th time. He had to play Colton Sissons against Sidney Crosby. I mean, I don't know what else to say. That's it.
The thing that I also want to mention, that was a power play for the Penguins. That was legitimately, they had on that first power play unit Olympians at every position on it versus a Nashville power play that was probably Arvidsson, Johansson, Forsberg, Yossi, and Subban.
Yeah.
And it didn't end in 4.
Yeah, that's, I mean...
Also,
Also
fun little fact, they got only a -1 out of Rangers legend Anthony Potato on that 16-17.
Oh, that's impressive. I didn't even know he was on that team.
Neither did I till 5 seconds ago. Yeah, apparently he was there.
Yeah, so he can definitely make deep playoff runs. I just, oh man, like I said before, I'm just going to be terrified until the playoffs roll around because it doesn't matter what happens. Mika could have another 5-goal game, and I'm going to be sitting there like, cool. Just do something in the playoffs, please. And the one other thing that I will say about him, obviously, I believe the last 2 times we were on here, we completely ripped apart the roster. But I just want to say about Mika, like this upcoming season, assuming they make the playoffs, barring something that I don't even want to think about. Like, if they somehow don't make the playoffs, that is a completely different headache to be had.
That'll be a fun
We're not even going to think about that right now, but assuming that they do, this has to be the one where he has a consistent playoff run, man, because even last year, people really seem to forget that for 5 games against the Penguins, he didn't even look like he belonged on the same ice as Crosby, as any of those players. He was bad. So obviously he came to life, and when you actually sit there and look at his playoff numbers from last year, it doesn't look that bad, but 90% of that was on the power play. And if this team's going to make, if they're going to win it all, he's got to be the guy that really, I'm not even asking him to play 80% better. I'm asking him to play like 40 to 50% better, and he will probably be fine. Because if he can, I believe he had like 16 points it might actually be higher than 16 points in the playoffs last year, but it was pretty high for the amount of games he played. And if he can do that with only scoring on the power play, all I need is like 50% improvement, and he'll probably be fine. I know that was super random. I'm just seeing a lot of, the more time goes on from this fan base and the more tweets I see, I just feel like not enough is being talked about with Mika Zibanejad. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is. Like I'm genuinely so disappointed in the fact that he was a ghost, in the playoffs. So
Well, the
like I
thing
said,
is,
this upcoming season, it's all got to change, man. It's a different coach. It's got to be this year.
well, I mean, the thing with Mika Zibanejad, like, people need to put more on him. There needs to be more pressure on Mika Zibanejad. When
He's the number one center.
He's the number one center. When he is playing at his best, he is a game-wrecking player at either end of the ice when he's playing at his best. And people have continually viewed him as like a co-star for this team. No! It's him and Panarin. It's 1A, 1B. These guys are very, very equal in overall talent and production. I mean, Zibanejad recently scored 40-plus goals. That was not long ago.
Yeah, they both had 90 points this past year.
He had 39 goals last year. Like, he basically had it. This is, and I looked it up for the playoff run in 21-22, so 2 years ago. He had 24 points in that playoff run.
Yeah.
And the majority of those, I would guess, I don't know offhand, that the majority of those came from the Carolina and then Tampa series.
Mm-hmm.
When he plays well, when he gives it what he has, he can wreck it. He can destroy games. And he has got as good of a slap shot on power plays as any player in the sport. You cannot look around and I would put him in the same thing along with Ovechkin and Stamkos. He's got that one-timer on the power play. You've got to get him to consistently give a shit, and if you can do that, you've got another star player. They just have to actually convince him to do that.
And the reason that I brought that up, I don't want to make it seem like I had an urge today to rip Mika Zibanejad. The reason that I brought that up is just because, like we mentioned before, Laviolette, obviously he's known for holding players accountable, and I'm just excited to see what happens in the playoffs. Like if Mika has one of those ghost games, I'd be shocked if it happens again, or at least without some sort of news breaking that Laviolette called him out or something like that, because like we've said multiple times, Gallant, he's not a speech guy. He will legitimately say nothing in between periods in a playoff game to the team. Like that's not, for whatever reason, that's not his style. But it's the complete opposite with Laviolette. So if we have another series where Zibanejad is just getting dominated, I really would be shocked if that happens for 4 or 5 games straight, like we've seen the past couple years with him. Like I said, I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm sitting here and I was just like, I really just want to talk shit about Mika Zibanejad today. That's not what I wanted to do.
You woke up
I'm just like
violence.
I want to see what happens when he actually has a coach that will get in his face a little bit and say, let's go. Because like you just said, he is a game-wrecking player. And if he could do that consistently in the playoffs, they seriously could win the whole thing. Him and Panarin. And when you look at any cup-winning team, there's a 1-2 punch of players that are just game wreckers for essentially the entire playoffs, and we need those guys to do that. Especially because it's not like they're 24 years old, like they're getting up there a little bit. And this year we're going to be even more tied to the cap than we already are. Once all the contracts, stuff shakes out, we're going to have even less money than we already have, and we already have none. So
they're so broke, man.
They've got to, those two guys have got to pull weight, because they're not going to get much help at the deadline anymore. Like I'd be shocked if the Rangers find a way to actually have money to bring in a couple guys at the deadline. So they've got to pull their own weight. They're not going to get any help, and hopefully this coach unlocks that. The one other thing I will say, obviously Laviolette does not have the best track record of developing players, but I think now the Rangers are in a situation where Lafreniere and Kakko are basically going to be forced into the top 6. So, I don't care who the coach is. Those two guys, it's got to be this year, man. This year's got to be the breakout year. There's no more holding hands. We saw a step forward last year, and it solves a whole lot of our problems if they end up breaking out. So all I ask is that they please just figure it out this year.
I'll say a couple things. I thought you were gonna go off on Mika Zibanejad because of the music festival. Honest to God, I thought that's what.
Oh, we'll get there. But
no.
Well, just to quickly touch on that. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about all of this, and he's gonna be playing. He's gonna be DJing at a music festival, and we're just while we're sitting here begging him to try in the playoffs, he's like adding songs to a playlist, like as we speak. So I'm not exactly happy with him. But continue with everything else.
Have you listened to much Mika Zibanejad in your off time?
I have not.
It's an experience. No, there are no more like moral victories for this team, and there's no more leniency. I could not care less what happens in the regular season. It only matters once we get to the postseason. That is it. I'm not grading. Panarin could go out and score 130 points, and I'd be like, that's neat. So there's this cool time called the postseason. What do you do then? Other than that, a lot of my care is gone. With the thing of hopefully developing Lafreniere and Kakko, they're done. They have to do it now. They are going to be leaned upon. You have no money whatsoever. It's them. You are very likely not going to be able to go trade for another Hall of Fame player at the deadline who forces his way onto you. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. That doesn't happen too often. That's kind of an oddity.
I would bet a lot of money it's not going to happen again.
I don't think leading up to the deadline, someone like Patrice Bergeron is going to come out and be like, fellas, you know what I'm thinking? I demand to be moved.
I only want to play. Yeah. That's not probably not going to happen.
You've got to depend on them. The good news is for them, and Kakko said it in his exit interview of wanting more ice time, you're going to get it. It's happening. That might not be a good thing for you because they have no one else. And so I think for quite a few players, for the majority of this team, and I think you can look even to whether it's Drury, whether it's Panarin, Zibanejad, Trouba, all of them, this is a make or break season. Because Panarin's been here a few years, that 11 point whatever $1 million cap hit is starting to look a bit sketch. Zibanejad's getting paid a good bit to be a power play merchant, and I like Mika Zibanejad a lot. And I'm not saying that to be mean to him, because he's one of my favorite players, but to be a power play merchant. Kreider's making a good bit of money to also be sort of a power play tip merchant. This is Trouba's second year as captain, and I would debatably say it's his third year, because I understand that he was not named the captain. The interview said leading into the 21-22 season, I don't know how he wasn't captain then. I think it was Kreider's interview specifically that said that a lot of like, oh yeah,
I do remember Kreider saying that. Yeah.
So it's the third year of him being the mainstay leader. I'll put it like that, and also being a defenseman that you're paying like $8 million. You know, just throwing that out there. This is it, and also for Laviolette, I don't know how many more teams he's going to have an opportunity to coach because he's not old. He's not 70 Daryl Sutter. But he's going to be 60 in a couple years. This is his Islanders, Carolina, Philly, Nashville, his sixth team. He's not going to go to all 30 or 32. Like, he's running out of opportunities there. Yeah. This is it for a lot of players, and especially Laf and Kakko, where if they don't go out and produce a lot, they're being fired into the void. And not just by the Rangers trading them to some other team. Like, if the Rangers right now were to cut Lafreniere, just hypothetically speaking, a team isn't going to pick him up, provided they're not in the cellar trying to tank, and make him a top six forward off the gun and put him with a player like either Artemi Panarin or Mika Zibanejad. That's not happening. Like, there's no shot in hell if tomorrow morning they cut him, Edmonton would be like, yeah, you want to play with McDavid and Draisaitl?
He would probably be lower than Zach Hyman in the lineup, for sure. So
like he would be that bottom six, maybe bottom three, the fourth liner guy for a lot of teams, because they wouldn't see him and be like, ah, yes, we have that invested in him. He's got the opportunity in New York to make that. He's going to have the time in New York to make that, and he's going to have now the minutes to do that for both him and Kako. They've got to actually show it. And it's the same thing, or I guess it's a little bit different for them, because I want to see that stuff from the regular season, because honestly, in a weird Freaky Friday sense, they've been the ones to show up in the playoffs. Obviously not this past season, even though I thought the kids line looked pretty solid against the Devils, if it wasn't just inconsistent. They can do it in the playoffs. So I am less fearful come postseason next year in what Lafreniere, Kako, and Hedel would do than I am what Panarin, Zibanejad, and Trocheck would do.
Yeah.
Which is a lovely situation to be in for us, might I say. But I have less fear in them falling off come postseason time than the main stars. I gotta see something out of them in the first 82. And it
definitely
can't be this, they have a 4-point game and then nothing for a month and then some crazy through the legs goal that makes Rangers Twitter lose their shit to make me go, yes, give them a 10-year extension. This is a good idea. I'd say, and I don't love putting point mandates on players because the goalpost could change, and if one of them were to get injured, which I hope that it doesn't happen, but if one of them were to get injured and then that changes the dichotomy of it, or how they get to that total, if they don't both crack 50, I think we're done here.
At least, yeah.
I think 50 is the bottom of the barrel.
Because that's definitely bare minimum. Because if they have another 35 to 40 point season, that either means that they just don't produce in the top 6, or they lost their top 6 spots and they're back on the third line again. Yeah. Either way, that's not good, So obviously 50 is like, bottom of the barrel. We could still get by with the other players on the team producing at what we'd expect them to. But I would say for me to really feel confident, I at least 70. I don't know if that's crazy to say. I don't think it should be, because they're third and fourth years in the league now.
Yeah.
And they were first and second overall. So I don't think 70 points is a crazy ask. And like I said before, it solves a lot of problems for us if they end up becoming anything close to what we thought they were going to be. They would have probably won the Stanley Cup this year if they were at their ceilings. So, I mean, we got to start seeing it. The Rangers are an unbeatable team if those two guys really, break out. So, hopefully, the reason that I kind of tied this in with Laviolette is because, like you mentioned, we've seen them produce before. We've seen the kid line produce, maybe not consistently, but they've shown they could do it. So it's not like Laviolette has to start from scratch here. It's not like he's got to teach them the ways of the NHL game.
Right.
You just got to give them ice time and simply ask them to break out. I mean, that's where we're at right now, because they've shown that they can produce, like I said, inconsistently, but they've shown flashes of being able to produce and take over games sometimes. During the kid line's true hot streak, they were game wreckers.
Yeah.
They truly were. So they've shown they could do it. They just got to show it consistently, and they're going to get the ice time to prove it. So there's nobody else to blame at this point. A lot of people are upset because Laviolette's not exactly a developmental guy, but the thing is, he doesn't have to be. That when you're in a win now mode, and these first and second overall picks are now, a few years deep into their career, you cannot ask for a coach, a college coach or something. That's not where we're at as a team. They've shown that they can score, at a decent level. They've got to capitalize on the ice time. They have to, because if the Rangers are gasping for air at the trade deadline, again, that means that Laff and Kako are not doing enough again. Well, so this is the year. There's no excuses.
I'll throw a couple things out there. One, he's not going to have to convince them to try, because you can say a lot of things against Lafreniere, Kako, and Hedel. You can't say that they just half-ass it. They try.
Yeah,
they go hard in the paint every time. And even in the games where they have no points and no shots, they're still grinding away on a forecheck. So they at least have
Mm-hmm.
that. This isn't Laviolette having to come in and be like, hey guys, maybe actually try today. That would be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
So he has
Mm-hmm.
a base level to work with them. Second, again, it goes back to ice time. They don't have the assets or the money to go get anyone. They are at the deadline going to pick up a fourth line, maybe if Drury works another like S tier deal, a third line player.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have anything to go out and get the complementary pieces that you have the past year. And I'm not even talking about the Tarasenko or Kane moves. You couldn't go get a Vetrano this season. If you absolutely...
Yeah.
If that's where you're at the deadline, and please, for the love of God, don't be at that level where you're needing a top 6, top 3 forward. You don't have it. It's them. They are, and for better or worse, a mixture of, I don't think Laviolette is going to change the lines. And you can look at a lot for him. He just lets the lines ride. And he did that a lot in Nashville. He did that a lot in Washington. He's not
which is
bringing
what
out
the
blender.
players were asking for last year.
He's not going to bring out the
Rangers
blender
players were,
every 5 games. They're going to stick with it. And it's just sort of one of those, through hell or high water, Panarin is going to be line mates with Lafreniere for the rest of the season. And there's just nothing either one of them can do about it. And I feel the same with Kakko, with Zibanejad, and Kreider. There's no one to move around. And I swear to God, if Jimmy Vesey ends up in the top 3 again.
Oh, we will.
And I like
think
Jimmy
about
Vesey.
that.
I like Jimmy Vesey. Great
Yeah.
fourth line player. Loved him this season. Please don't make me watch that.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Like, I feel overall, and I don't think I've said this, at least explicitly, I am very happy with this hire. I would have... The Knobloch thing is interesting, but I just like chaos. And so I think I'm going to be swayed a little bit to say, oh yeah, Knobloch would have been interesting. This is the right move for the team that they have right now. It was not Hines. It was definitely not Patrick Waugh. That was a fun 3-day fire drill when that name was floating around.
Yeah, that was so, man. I don't even want to think about the conversation that we would have had if that ended up happening. I can't even, I don't want to ever have to think about that ever again. Ever.
But
Because, I mean, at that point, that is on the same tier for me as Mark Messier being hired. Like, that is just, you are essentially hiring a coach knowing that he's not going to do anything. He's literally not going to do anything. So thank God we don't have to think about that. Like you said, I'm on board with you. I definitely am very happy with the hire, especially the more that we actually sit here and break everything down. I know, maybe a lot of the advanced stats and whatnot for Laviolette aren't the best. But at the end of the day, he was the best. He was the best guy available. There's no other way of saying that. None of the elite coaches are going anywhere. And for a win now team, he was the right guy, right? So we'll see what happens. As of right now, we're sitting here very happy. Hopefully he keeps it that way, obviously, but I'm also pretty confident that he will, in the sense that he is, like you said, he's not going to bring out the line blender a whole lot. And the other thing is, like I mentioned before with the Capitals, I don't know what he could have done to change the outcome of the season for them. I have no clue. If somebody could actually sit there and write me a list of all the things he did wrong for them this year, then I will at least give you some credit and I will entertain it. But that was just a team that's not trying to win and a team full of players that are out of their prime. Like, there's nothing he could have done there. And I'm just excited to see what he's able to do with players that are in their prime. And it has certainly been a very, very long time since he's had a roster with this much talent on it. It's been, I don't even know the last time. I can't even think off the top of my head the last time that anything comes close to it on paper. Right. So I'm excited to see what he's able to do. We've talked a whole lot about what he's been able to do with a lack of talent. But it's been over a decade since he's had legitimate stars on a team, that he's coached. And I'm not talking about 80-year-old Alex Ovechkin. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a legitimate in their prime, ready to win now roster. It's been the last time he's had that I was in elementary school.
Yep.
So we'll see how this shakes out. The one other thing that I will just hammer home, this has been on the players. It has been from, game 3 of the playoffs this year. It's been on them to turn this around. So obviously they needed a new voice. We spoke about the rumors that they asked for a new voice in the exit interviews. We understand all that, but regardless of who's behind the bench, we have to see more from several players on this roster. So I'm just excited to see how they respond to, quite frankly, being embarrassed against the Devils. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We have a lot of time until the regular season, and even way longer until the playoffs. But they should feel humiliated, and we'll see what happens. A new coach and a whole offseason to sit there and think about what went wrong, especially in a year where they, obviously genuinely believed within themselves they could win the whole thing, right? I mean, they would cruise through the whole regular season if they didn't believe that, especially with the way the roster looked. I mean, they probably, they went into game 1 of the playoffs expecting to win the Stanley Cup. I know everybody does that, but genuine belief that you have the team to do it and you get bounced in the first round is one of the most embarrassing and heartbreaking things as an athlete. So I'm excited to see how the leaders on this team respond to that, and many months from now, how they respond and how they flip the switch in the playoffs and prove that maybe last season wasn't a fluke, because I know they probably heard that a million times.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to dig deep within themselves, and obviously everybody's going to get their ice time now. You still have the team to make a deep run and do it, so we'll see what happens.
Time will tell, and it's going to be a painful 11 months until they get back to the postseason to see what they can do again. But I am fascinated to see what happens both with coaching, the player effort, and then what possible moves Drew will make. But that'll all come in time. And, I mean, we might have a couple of different players by the time we get to the season, because, I mean, there's not much money to go around, but there might be a depth signing here and there. I would give a lot for Mott to come back, but that's all up in the air and to be decided. I think for right now, I'm pretty content. I think I've said what I need to say and what I want to say about Laviolette and this hire. And obviously,
that's pretty much it. Yeah, I'm still in shock. I will never be used to that. I hope it all grows back before opening night, because I cannot handle seeing that on the ice.
Dog.
I've definitely said my piece with everything. I guess the one other thing we'll just talk about for a little bit, obviously, the Stanley Cup is potentially being handed out tonight. So yeah. I don't know how you're feeling about what's going to happen. But I'm definitely shocked at the Panthers. I really thought they were going to do it. I mean, not to discredit Vegas, but the way Bobrovsky was playing, obviously the series isn't over, but barring an insane Stanley Cup final comeback, it's over. Before this, I thought the Panthers were playing damn near perfect, and they just got away from a lot of things.
Yeah.
The one other thing I will say that's shocking is the first 2 games, man. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk was in the penalty box, for basically the entirety of the first 2 games. So come on. If I was, if I was a diehard Panthers fan, I would be sitting there just screaming at him for doing that. Your best player is not on the ice to his own fault. So,
dude, he went off the rail, and he was off the rails in a good way to that point, and I don't know what ticked in his mind. But, dude, the first 2 games for him were bad.
That was really brutal.
Didn't he have, he took 3 penalties the first game, did he not? Or am I out of my mind?
Yeah, I remember seeing that, his penalty minutes was, around 30 minutes over the first 2 games. It was a lot. I think a couple of them were misconducts or something like that late in the game. But I was like, man, that he is just... Not to make it seem like he sold the series for them, but he definitely put them in a hole very early, and now they're, and now they're down 3-1. So We'll see what happens tonight. I hope that they at least, that the Panthers at least force a game 6. We'll see though. I don't know. The way Vegas is playing right now is
Aiden
something
Hill
I didn't
is
expect.
popping off.
Yeah, I mean Aiden Hill's making paddle saves, man. Like I don't know what else to say. I didn't expect that. But the way their whole team is playing, like their forechecking is ridiculous. I don't know how Florida's going to pull it off. But we'll see. And I guess whatever I say, the opposite happens, because I think I picked Dallas to beat Vegas.
Yeah.
And obviously that did not happen. The one other thing I will say, because I don't think we I think the last time we recorded was before that series. Yeah. But the Dallas Stars got a case of whatever the Rangers had, because their top players did nothing.
That's not true. Jamie Benn made an impact.
Yeah, it was a negative one, but he, yeah. By the way,
the impact. Mark Stone.
Oh yeah, yeah. By the way, one of the dirtiest players in the league,
Jesus,
for sure. I mean, dude. Well, here's the thing. That's not a one-time thing. He's been doing this for years. So, I mean, not only are you getting paid way too much money and not producing, you are legitimately getting suspended like it's your job. So, I don't know what else. I mean, at least our players aren't doing that.
Yeah.
I guess that's the bright side. At least Mika Zibanejad is not sitting there and cross-checking someone in the face while they're down on the ice. I guess that's a positive.
No one does a better job of making people forget how dirty they are than Jamie Benn. Like, every 3 years, he'll do this, and people are like, oh my god, did you see what Jamie Benn did? I'm like, you're shocked? Like, do you not remember 2 years ago when he did the same thing?
He probably does it numerous times throughout the regular season, but it's just the fact that they play at like 10 p.m. every night, so nobody really sees it.
No one's watching. No one watches Dallas, I will say.
Yeah.
This, as a person who likes to see Canadians cry, was the perfect Stanley Cup final for me. Watching two teams, the only way it could have been better was Dallas, Texas, and Sunrise, Florida going at it for the Stanley Cup. That would have been beautiful.
Yeah,
That would have just been mint. As a bunch of angry, like, French Canadians talk about how it's rigged, that would have been a joy to watch for me.
They're still hell-bent on that being the case.
Like, buddy, that's not it, friend. Areno, I'm sorry to tell you this.
Yeah, so I guess we will see what happens tonight. I hope that we have more hockey to watch after tonight, but I don't think that's gonna happen. We'll see. I don't know.
I hope you're wrong. I really hope this goes 7. I hope it comes out with the Panthers, but man, I don't know what.
Yeah.
You can't find a whole lot of optimism in the Panthers games to this point.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
And I'll say it
I thought they might have tied it up in game 4, but that obviously didn't happen. I thought they were going to do it for a second. I really did. But that obviously was not the case.
To throw it out there real quick and then we'll call it. Was the Aiden Hill paddle save the best save in finals history?
No, and I will say that Holtby's save against Vegas,
really,
ironically enough, was way better.
I got to go with the Hill one, man. I
don't know. I think the fact that it was the cup clinching game for Holtby and that would have tied it for Vegas. I don't know. I think I remember just watching that live. I was like, oh my god! Like as sitting there, if I was a Vegas fan watching that happen, I would have just been crushed because that was
off moment.
Yeah, that absolutely. Like I mean. I think if Aiden Hill were to do that tonight, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, absolutely. But the fact, I think when Holtby did it, there was like 2 minutes left, and Tuck had a wide open net, and that would have tied it for Vegas. Like and not only that, it was in Vegas. Could you imagine if they did tie it up? They would have absolutely won in overtime just because the building would have been ridiculous.
Blown up.
So I mean, they're pretty much the same save. I'm just gonna give it to Holtby just because of the circumstance. But I think like watching it, if I had no clue what the circumstances were, I would probably say Hills was better for sure. But I just think the scenario that Holtby did it in was way better.
That's fair, and I can't really disagree with that. I think the overall, in a vacuum, I'd say Hills, but the circumstances, the situation for Holtby. That Holtby's random ass run, by the way, that was so strange.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
he was
fallen
a
off at
good
that
goalie
point
for
and
a
then
few
came
years,
back.
but yeah, like I mean, he was considered, on the higher tier of goalies leading up to that year, but that year it was like he just showed something that he never showed previously. So the Capitals were just on crack that year, and they ended up getting over the hump because of it, and they've been in party mode ever since. So
That is the most 72 Dolphins I've ever seen.
yeah, yeah,
All right, I think we've covered it all and then some. I
yeah.
think we're
That
good.
should be it. Yeah,
All right. Well, until next time, I don't know when that will be. Whenever something interesting happens for the Rangers, we'll have to come back and
yeah.
go over it. But as for right now, I think that's all we have. So, thank you all so very much for watching and tuning into the 10th episode of the Rangers Gameplan podcast. Until next time, I am Weston, and go Rangers.
Go Rangers.